YouTube, what is going on? Welcome back to the future #1 reaction channel. And all of YouTube, we usually do music. Today we're diving into Alec Baldwin. For those of you guys who don't know, Alec Baldwin is an American actor. He was on set of a Western film. He had a gun, wasn't supposed to be loaded. He was pointing it. He said he just cocked back. It back, did not pull the trigger. When he released it, the gun fired, and it killed a cinematographer. And then injured someone behind him. And a lot of speculation, a lot of videos that came out now because a lot of gun experts are saying that's impossible. Like, you had to have pulled the trigger. And then he went on George Stramanopanopoulos. And for a pretty easy interview, his PR obviously set that up. And he kind of made it seem like, let's feel bad for Alec Baldwin. And sure, if it's an accident, I don't know what side I'm on. If it's an accident, yeah, you should. I feel bad for the guy, but that's nothing compared to what the victim's family feels and what the victim died, right? So, I mean, not a good look on his part. I mean, come on, right? Like, death compared to like this happening to him, it just doesn't compare. So I'm from Canada. I know nothing about guns. I don't own a gun. I don't want to get into views on anything like that, but this is a gun expert here. So this is videos from USCCA. This guy's going to walk us through how this gun works, and so we can sort of educate ourselves and get to the bottom of what happened.
I have here a Colt Model P. This is commonly called the Single Action Army. This is the real gun that was used on the set of Rust. Not that particular gun, but they used a Pieta replica. And Pieta bills itself as the company that makes a replica so true, all of the original parts from this original Colt pistol will fit in and are interchangeable.
That's definitely good to know. That's definitely good to know, because that matters, right? If it's a replica, it might not be the same gun, but if they're claiming it's, where they bought it from is a replica that's identical, then, that means a lot when you're trying to analyze and dissect what happened here.
Both at Pieta. So Alec Baldwin was saying that he was pointing the gun. He said he wasn't pointing it at the director of photography, which is patently false, because if he wasn't pointing it at her, the bullet would not have hit her. Bullet flies in a straight line. When it comes out the muzzle, flies in an absolutely straight line.
Another valid point, right? If I'm pointing at the camera right now, and shoot, it's going to hit the camera. If I'm pointing over here and the gun goes off, the bullet is going this way. It's not curving, right? So that's a very good point.
Drops a little bit over distance. That's it. So he had to be pointing it at her. And then he said, I pulled the hammer back and I said, how does this look? And I pulled the hammer back a little more and I said, how does this look? And I pulled the hammer back a little more and I said, how does this look? And then I let go of the hammer and bang. Well, that is an absolute lie. Well, we can't say absolute lie. That is not the truth. Now, before we do anything with this gun, I want to let you know that we have loaded it with cartridge cases, equipped only with primers. That's it. No powder, no projectile, just the primer.
And isn't that how the Hollywood guns are supposed to be? It's just loaded with the primer, right? Not an actual bullet in the casing. I thought that's how it's supposed to be. That's still a kind of a mystery too. Like, how did real bullets get into this gun?
So if I can make this gun go off, if I can make this gun fire, you'll hear a pop like a big cap gun and maybe see a little flash come out the muzzle. That's it. Everybody in this studio was given the opportunity to check this firearm and recheck it. We put it together so it is perfect.
Sorry to stop it again, but there's another point is, I don't care if you're an actor. I don't care if it's like you use guns all the time in these scenes. It's still a deadly weapon. So if anyone, I don't care. I know people get complacent, and when you do things for a long time, and it's always been fine. I'm guilty of it myself. You don't go through all the safety steps. But when you have a gun pointed at someone, I mean, if it's me, I don't care how long I've been doing it. I'm always checking the gun. I'm always double checking before the scene, right? It's someone's life. Like, that's someone's life in jeopardy. And whether it was an accident or not, but for him to not take those safeties, like take it into his own hands to make sure that the gun was safe, there has to be some punishment for that. I'm a plumber gas fitter by trade. If I go into a house, and I've been doing it for 13 years, if I go into a house and I'm hooking up a gas appliance and I don't check the safeties and I just say, hey, see you later, and that gas fireplace or furnace explodes because I did something something malfunctioned, but I didn't test it, I'm held accountable for that. Like, I'm liable when I go into a house and do that. I don't see how that's any different in acting and, this specific scenario here.
Safe, no one can get injured. So I'm going to talk about what Alec Baldwin said and what is the truth about the Colt Model P, the single action army that he was using on the set of that movie. First of all, Alec Baldwin said,
guiding me through how she wants me to hold the gun for this angle. And I draw the gun out and I find a mark, I draw the gun out, I find a cut. And what's really urgent is the gun wasn't meant to be fired in that angle.
So if you're shooting directly into the camera lens, you're not aiming.
I'm not shooting into the camera lens. I'm shooting just off.
Just off.
Right, in her direction.
Bullet flies in the straight line from the muzzle wherever it was pointed. Doesn't curve, unless you're watching the Zapruder film and that bullet curved.
I got to stop this guy right now. So Alec does say there, a lot of people are saying, he didn't point to the camera. I don't know if she was standing directly behind the camera or not. So say the camera's here. She might be standing over here, so he's pointing off. He might have been pointing towards where she was standing, which still doesn't change anything. If you're pointing a gun at someone, holy smokes, you better, like, guns scare me a bit. Like I said, I'm Canadian. Guns scare me a bit. And I know I'm just not educated enough with guns to feel comfortable around them, but you better believe that I'm going to be checking that gun and I'm going to be somewhat concerned, right? I don't know. We'll see. Let's run it.
Bullet flies in a straight line from the muzzle to its target, might drop a little bit over distance. That's it. So he had to have the gun pointed at her.
Yes, facts.
Next thing he said was that he pulled the hammer back a little bit and said, how's this look? Pulled the hammer back a little bit more, said, how's this look? You can see it on his video, see it on his interview. Pulled the hammer back a little more, how does this look? Pulled the hammer back a little more, then I let go of the hammer and pow, the gun went off. I never pulled the trigger. He said he never pulled the trigger.
Kept doing this, and so then I said to her, now in this scene, I'm going to cock the gun. And I said, do you want to see that? And she said, yes. So I take the gun.
The trouble about actors giving these interviews is they are actors. Their profession is going into a different character. I wouldn't call it lying, but you're pretending to be something you're not. So when an actor gives an interview, you better believe that he knew what he was going to say in this interview, and I think he picked a very soft interviewee, George Stromanopoulos, and so it's very hard to tell by his facial expressions or how he's talking if he's lying or not, right? He's an actor, so he's good at it.
And I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger.
Dramatic music.
Well, just dramatic
music in the background here.
And I cock the gun. I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
Let's see why that is not true. All right, so gun is actually in the worst possible position. The hammer is down now, resting on the primer of one of these cartridges. So he said he pulled the hammer back a little bit and said, how does this look? Let's see what happens when we pull the hammer back an eighth of an inch. An eighth of an inch. Now, the entire system is locked. This hammer can't move forward. I can pull the trigger all day long and nothing happens. I'm pulling the trigger pretty hard right here. Pretty stout pull, nothing happens. So he said he pulled the hammer back and he let it go. There's a notch on the bottom of the hammer in which the hammer spring fits. And once that notch is engaged with that hammer spring, the hammer cannot go forward and hit the primer. It simply cannot. It's physically stopped. So we pull it back and we let it go and nothing can happen. Then he said, I pull it back a little bit more, pull it back a little bit more. Let's pull it back a little bit more.
Because originally what I was thinking when he was saying this is like, I don't know how guns work, right? So I'm thinking he pulls that like that and it just snaps forward and it causes the bullet to fire. That's kind of what I thought happened. This is interesting.
There's another notch on the bottom of the hammer in which the hammer spring rests. The hammer spring is now locked into that second notch. That notch allows this system to load and unload the gun. Now we're at what's called half cock, and this will turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a 6-shooter. It will turn. That's how we load and unload the gun, through the loading gate on the other side. Even from here, pulling the hammer back and letting it go, it cannot get past that notch.
All right, so yeah, like I said, my original thoughts, that's what I thought happened. And in that case, it's still a accident, but I mean, you still got to check. You got to check the gun. Come on, people.
It cannot get past that notch unless you pull the trigger once you relieve the pressure from the hammer spring by pulling the hammer back a little, pulling the trigger, and we can drop it back to the safety position. It cannot move from that position unless you pull the trigger. Alec Baldwin said he never pulled the trigger.
Another thing to consider here is when you're working with a gun, I mean, these budgets are massive on these movies. Don't you think you would be, I'm not even going to say don't you think, I've got to believe that every actor is using a gun, a real gun in a film, is trained how the guns work. You know, if you hold the trigger to pull this, release it, it will shoot, etc., etc. I know right off the top of my head, you know, I think of the famous John Wick scene where he's at the gun range doing all that. And that was his training for that movie. So you've got to think that they're trained with these guns. They don't just hand a random gun because you want it to look realistic. You want it to feel like that, like the actor, the character he's portraying knows how to use the gun because that's what it would be like in real life, right? So you got to think he was trained with this gun as well.
Physically, and the way this gun works mechanically, that can't be true. So now let's say, as he said in his video, I pulled it back a little bit more, I pulled it back a little bit more, I pulled it back a little bit more.
Wow, interesting.
And I let go of the hammer and it went off. Now we've pulled it all the way back to the full cock position, the ready to fire position. And without my finger on the trigger, nothing will happen. Even if we pull it back and let it go all day long. With no finger on the trigger, the gun cannot be made to.
My question is, could the gun malfunction? I mean, obviously they're going to have some experts look at this. It's essentially a murder case, right? They'll obviously look at that and they'll have gun experts test it. If the gun malfunctions, then I mean, it's just it's a tragic event, but I still don't think, even if the gun malfunctions, I think there has to be some blame to the people who checked the gun, to Alec Baldwin himself for not checking the gun. You know, there has to be, just for the family and the person who was killed. You know, it's not fair. Like, we don't live in a world where you can just accidentally kill someone. Well, I take that back. People have accidentally killed people and had no punishments, but I digress. That's a different story.
To fire. But what happens if he puts his finger on the trigger and he's holding the hammer back and now he lets go?
Okay, yeah.
There. Bang. The gun goes off. What Alec Baldwin was telling people is that he never had his finger on the trigger. What I'm showing you is that he had to have had his finger on the trigger.
Also, what a stupid decision. Who told Alec Baldwin to go on that show and say your finger wasn't on the trigger? I mean, it just adds so much. This can all be used against him in court now, that he was lying. I mean, it discounts his credibility to what actually happened. And one other thing, isn't this all being filmed? Can't they just look at the film and see? So he must have not had it. If he actually had his gun on, if he actually pulled the trigger, they're going to do their investigations. And he said he didn't. And they just look at the camera. Like, there's 20 cameras probably filming him while this is happening. And they actually look at the film and he has. I mean, he's in a, that's not good. No bueno.
To make that gun go off. Now, there's one situation where this gun might go off where the hammer wouldn't stay back.
There we go.
That is
This is
if
what I'm
the
looking for.
bottom side of that hammer was so worn or damaged so as not to catch the hammer spring. And that would be a very easy test. Just give the gun, which I'm sure is locked up in evidence somewhere, to a competent gunsmith and have him look at the engagement surfaces on the bottom of the hammer. A properly maintained, properly functioning Colt single-action Army revolver will not fire. It will not be made to fire if the hammer is in proper functioning condition. We can pull it back and let it go all day long until we finally touch the trigger. That's when the gun goes off. Guns don't fire by themselves. They have to be made to fire. You have to do a specific series of things to make them fire, and that includes pressing the trigger. Alec Baldwin would know that if he'd gotten some training from the USCCA.
So anyway, that's the USCCA YouTube page. The original video is there. Go check it out. Subscribe to their page, obviously, if you enjoy that kind of stuff. Oh my God, I gotta quit vaping. Different topic. Interesting. Okay, I don't know what to think now. After watching that video, it seems pretty unlikely the gun just fired itself, because if he pulled it halfway, if that little thing was worn down, wouldn't it just snap back and fire right away, not, delay? I don't know. I don't know enough about guns. You guys let me know in the comments what you think. I'm undecided. I just hope that there will be, but excuse me. I hope there is a really thorough, good investigation into this, just for the families, for the victims, right? And I'm undecided. I'm going to do some more research. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. And until next time, I'll see you guys around. Peace.